On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the Marine Corps wants to build some light amphibious warships. They're calling them landing ship mediums, but in truth, it's just a landing ship tank 2.0. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to this episode of What's Going On with Shipping. So we're doing a little bit of a naval maritime side today, specifically with the United States Marine Corps, and we're going to be looking at United States Marine Corps ship requirements. The Marine Corps is advocating for a decrease in the overall size of the amphibious fleet, while at the same time calling for the increase in a new type of vessel. And this new type of vessel raises some concerns, at least for me. And so what I want to do is break down the latest video the Marine Corps have posted on this and talk about what exactly they're getting and some issues I see with their plan to build these new LSMs. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this video. So this latest video just came out from the Combat Development and Integration System. It's entitled Marine Corps Ship Requirements. Does the Marine Corps have ships? So I want to show you the intro to it, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit.
The MEU, enabled by amphibious ships, remains the crown jewel of our naval expeditionary forces. No naval vessel in our inventory is capable of supporting a more diverse set of missions than the amphibious warship.
So that is Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Berger. And General Berger has been extremely controversial for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is he issued a guidance recently that has really changed the focus of the Marine Corps from being a second army fighting a land war in Iraq and Afghanistan to really refocusing the Marine Corps' attention on the sea. This is that guidance from General Berger, and again, for the Commandant and his planning guidance, it has had a huge impact. And one of the big issues that he's done is develop the Marine Littoral Regiment. 3 Marine regiments have been redesignated as these Littoral Regiments. This comes directly from the Marine Corps page. And basically what they say here is a self-deployable multi-domain force optimized for the contact and blunt layers. It will persistently operate across the competition continuum to support the joint forces' role in assuring allies and partners, deterring adversaries, conducting and enabling joint force contact, blunt and surge activities. Man, the military loves using these phrases. But what I want to get down here is really what this thing consists of. So a Marine Littoral Regiment will be capable of the following missions: conduct Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, EABO. This is the catchphrase the Marines are using a lot. Conduct strike, coordinate air and missile defense actions, support Marine domain awareness, support surface warfare. Surface warfare is a key thing. They're talking about anti-ship strikes, and support operations in the information environment. The MLR plan for Hawaii will be the first of its kind in the Marine Corps. It goes down here what it'll consist of. An MLR will employ 3 subordinate units: a littoral combat team, a littoral anti-air battalion, and a combat logistics battalion. The approximate size of an MLR will be between 1,800 and 2,000 Marines and sailors. By comparison, the 3rd Marines, which is a regiment, has approximately 3,400. So definitely smaller units. And the key is they want to operate these units among the first island chain. These are the string of islands from Japan through Okinawa to Taiwan and the Philippines, where the units will be able to operate. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. So I'm going to jump around this video a bit. It's a 10 and a half minute video.
We must retain no less than 31 amphibious warfare ships to meet requirements stated in national defense strategies spanning multiple administrations. Until 2010, the amphibious ready groups and Marine expeditionary units maintained the ability to provide the Joint Force Commander with 3 ARG-MEUs globally 365 days a year.
These were the battalion forces that were put on U.S. Navy amphibious vessels, L-class vessels, LHAs, LHDs, LPDs, LSDs, and stationed around the world. These were it. I mean, you had 3 of these around the world, 365 days of the year. It was just the hallmark of the Marine Corps. But over time, that number has decreased, and what we're seeing is a decrease from 38 ships down to 31 amphibious ships.
Analytical studies from 2008 to 2022 show that with current maintenance readiness, 31 amphibs are required to keep 2 ARG-MUs forward throughout the year.
So we're going from 3 ARG-MUs down to 2.
Each made up of 3 amphibious warships. Today, if directed, contingency plans indicate that we will be required to deploy 5 ARG-MUs in a condensed time frame in times of conflict.
So if war hits, you're going to be putting 5 battalion task forces. This is what a MU is, a Marine Expeditionary Unit. Marines are unique in that they do slices. They have a land component, they have an air component, and they have a logistics component.
In addition, ships must be available for training to ensure the proficiency we need to meet our mission essential tasks.
So this decrease in the number of amphibious ships is one of the key issues that they're talking about.
The 30-year shipbuilding plan, when combined with decommissioning plans, sees a drastic decline in amphibious warfare ships from 31 in 2022 to 28 in fiscal year 2025, and then to 24 in fiscal year 2037.
Now, I have to say, this video doesn't talk about how they fix this. They're talking about a new amphibious vessel, this LSM, this landing ship medium, which was the light amphibious vessel, light amphibious warship. They don't talk about how they're fixing this issue, which I think is really paramount, because understand something. These large amphibious vessels is how the Marine Corps moves around. Even when you need to deploy, for example, a whole Marine division, for example, when they move the 1st Marine Division to Somalia in 1992, or they moved it during Iraq Desert Storm, Desert Shield, or to Iraq in 2003 and 2004. They used amphibs largely. As you decrease this number of amphibs, you're going to have to replace them with sea lift vessels. And I have a whole video here that way up there that talks about sea lift recapitalization. There is less sea lift ships out there. The other thing that the Marines would use periodically, which is not mentioned in here almost at all, is the pre-positioning ships. The Marines used to have 3 squadrons of commercial ships stationed around the world, each capable of supporting a Marine brigade of 16,500 Marines for 30 days. We have gone down from 3 brigades down to about 1 today. We phased out the brigade that was afloat off of Europe in 2012, and now the Marines have laid up a number of ships from the 2 squadrons, one in Diego Garcia in the ocean, the other in Western Pacific, and now they barely have about enough equipment for 1 brigade afloat. So the Marines are cutting back, and the Navy is too, and again, whether their choice or not, this is what's happening. The number of gray hull amphibs is cutting back, and the number of pre-positioning ships is cutting back.
Concurrently, historic naval fleet readiness levels are 46%, compared to the planned 80%.
Okay, that's a huge issue right here. The fact that they're actually getting a 46% readiness on ships when it's supposed to be 80%. Again, did another video a while back when they did a sea lift test to test the sea lift fleet. The sea lift fleet was supposed to be at 85%. It was at 40%. So there's a underlying issue with shipyards, ship repair, that the Navy and the Department of Defense needs to address.
And extended maintenance cycles are averaging 12 plus months, vice 8.
Okay, so it's taking longer in shipyards than what you normally have. This means that across the board, you are not getting the number of ships into the fleet that you need. And again, what the Marine Corps are now talking about, their solution to this, is to cut back the number of big deck amphibs, and now they're going to build a whole new class of vessels designed to operate in the forward environment on a much smaller scale. Okay, let's hear what they got to say.
Maritime mobility within an adversary's reach is crucial to our success. Operating inside this zone will enable Marines to hold key terrain while our larger amphibious ships secure critical sea lines of communication.
Okay, they're talking about using Marine amphibs to secure sea lines of communication. These are the lines leading into the combat zone. So if you're fighting China, you're talking about the amphibs operating well beyond outside the first island chain, grabbing the supply lines, the sea lines of communication, whereas these new light amphibious warships, LSMs, landing ship mediums, will operate within the military zone.
We must be able to move troops and supplies within the WES. This opens the door for additional follow-on forces from the Marine Corps and the larger joint force to mobilize and respond.
So, you need to secure all this to be able to bring, when they say the joint force, they don't want to say Army or Air Force, but that's what they're talking about. And so these new vessels will operate within that first island chain, moving Marines around and deploying these Marine Littoral regiments, which is what we're going to see talked about here.
Distributed maritime operations, such as Expeditionary Advanced Space Operations, demands the ability to maneuver to and within the global littorals. A key planning factor remains operating without ports or runways. To achieve this, we require 35 medium landing ships produced by the Navy's Light Amphibious Warship program, in addition to our traditional amphibious warfare ships. These light amphibious warships are smaller than our recognizable ships, but larger than our current ship-to-shore connectors, such as the Amphibious Combat Vehicle, Landing Craft Utility, or the Landing Craft Air Cushion.
So this is what they're talking about. Originally under that guise of the light amphibious warship. This is basically the two types of vessels that keep coming up, but this has the specifications what they want. So they're looking for a vessel between 200 and 400 feet in length, a draft of 12 feet, a displacement of 4,000 tons. It will have a crew of about 40 sailors on board, being able to embark up to 75 Marines, a cargo area of between 4 and 8,000 square feet, a transit speed of 14, but preferably 15 knots. Understand how slow that is. It's very slow. A range of 3,500 miles, a service life of 20 years, and then the survivability of Tier 2 plus. The plus level to withstand battle damage or absorb a hit from an enemy weapon while keeping the crew safe. Add to it, you want to have either a stern or bow landing ramp, because these are amphibious. These vessels will discharge their cargo not using a port, but over a beach. They want a modest suite of C4I, that's command control, communications, computers, and intelligence. They want to install 25, 30 millimeter gun systems, 50 caliber machine guns. So these are point defense weapons. There's almost no anti-air capability on these vessels. There's no radars, anti-air radars, anti-search radars. None of that stuff is on there. And then ability to operate within fleet groups or deploy independently. There are two types of models they're looking at right now in terms of designs that we've seen. So there's this design from Austal, which is basically a bow landing craft. In other words, it follows a conventional hull form. This hull form has an advantage in that it will be a little bit faster, but you have a beaching capability here where the bow kind of pops up. You put the ramp up and you discharge your cargo over the beach. You have stern anchors. You have to have stern anchors on these things because, again, I don't think the Marines understand the problem with beaching. Number one, you need the right grade. The hydrography needs to be perfect to do this. You basically need a perfect area of drop off from the beach so that you can run your vessel in. If it's too shallow, you can't get in. If it's too deep, you can't anchor and get in. You can't have a cross current, cross winds, because you have to worry about the vessel's broaching. And that's why you need these stern anchors to hold you in position and yank you back off. The other design is put up by this Australian firm that has the vessel backing in stern first. I don't understand this design at all because they will not release the information on it to open source because of proprietary issues. But basically they have a tunnel design where they suck water in through the bow and then shoot it out water jets in the stern. That's how you don't damage the vessel, supposedly. But again, you're going to need thrusters on this vessel to keep it in position. You're going to need a big, huge bow anchor on this. And I don't think anyone really has got a lot of experience in beaching vessels who are talking to the Marine Corps, or else they would know what the problem is with these designs. And basically what they want is a World War II landing ship tank. If you look at the design, those characteristics I just gave you, 200 to 400 feet in length, so many tons, except for the speed and the weapons, that's an LST. You can go up to Evansville, Indiana and get LST 325, re-engine it, slap on some modern guns on it, and you basically have what the Marine Corps want. Now, they're not going to call it an LST because, number one, the Marine Corps have just divested themselves of their tanks, so they don't want to call it that. The other reason is the Navy used to have landing ship tanks. This is the most recent iteration of them, the Newport class LSTs, which were designed and built in the 60s and 70s. They were in operation until the early 2000s. And basically they took the old LST model and they developed that over the bow ramp method that you saw in the Austral version of the LSM. They could do about 20 knots, but having worked with these LSTs before, man, they're a rough ride. They're flat bottom. They don't do well out in the ocean. They are not smooth riding platforms. And there are problems with anytime you come near the coast. All you got to do is look up the history of Lemoore County, which was a LST, USS Lemoore County, which did an operation down in Chile in the 1990s and grounded, and basically the vessel was damaged so severely during a beaching operation that they scrapped the vessel and did a sink-ex. They sank the vessel because of the damage associated with it. That's something, again, I don't think we're talking about enough with this. All right, let's get back to the video.
The 35 requirement stems from a minimum of 9 LSMs being required to support 1 Marine regiment. Our stand-in forces require maritime mobility for 3 regiments. To ensure 27 ships are available for these forces at any given time, we must account for 8 additional ships due to routine maintenance cycles.
Okay, I have to take a time out on this for a second. So they need 35 of these things. Number one, the question comes up. All right, 9 for regiment, 3 regiments, you get your 27. And then they want 8 more for maintenance. How did they get that number of 8? Because if you look at the U.S. Navy and how they operate their ships, they say for every deployed unit they have out there, they need 3 to 4 vessels to back it up. This is the exact inverse of that. It's because when you look at destroyers and you look at combatant vessels, submarines, and even their amphibs, they don't meet this schedule. And yet they're talking about this schedule being with 27 for the regiments out there. So you're keeping 9 deployed across 3 regiments. You have 8 in reserve. Again, I don't know what the 8, I don't know how they get to that 8 that support. I would understand if it was 9. 36 would make even more, a little bit more sense. At least it's 1 in 3. But anyway, they got 8. The other thing is they want 35 of these things. If they start building them today, how long is this going to take? Look at the production rate for things like the Military Sea Lift Command's EPF. They're getting 1 a year from Austral right now. The LCS, the Littoral combat ship, they're getting about 1 per year from the shipbuilders, Austral and Fincantieri. How many do you think you're going to get produced per year? These things got a shelf life of 20 years, they said, a service life of 20 years. Even if you build 2 a year, you're basically not going to reach your numbers until you're retiring these vessels. So I don't understand how they develop these numbers. I think there's a real problem with that in this proposal, but we'll go ahead. So there's a batch of testimony on here. They have comments from theater commanders, from the commander of Transcom, from some congressmen and members of Congress to look at. And you can go back and I'll have the link to the full video here, but I want to jump ahead here to this next section.
Ultimately, the LSM will allow Marines to rapidly and efficiently move throughout the battle space to sense and make sense of the adversary's actions and provide valuable intelligence to commanders. They are critical to modernizing our legacy pre-positioning capability into a dynamic, integrated, afloat and ashore network that is ideal for intra-theater, small-scale distribution and sustainment and will complement the actions of the larger naval and joint force.
Okay, that is a word salad of statements by that guy just now that he put in. So number one, legacy MPS, the maritime prepositioning ship. So they view this as replacing basically the legacy maritime prepositioning. That's what I am getting from this. The maritime prepositioning program is really expensive, and so they want to phase out parts of that fleet. The problem is that fleet, beyond prepositioning, huge amounts of equipment forward deployed that can be used. Those ships later support the units ashore for up to 30 days with food, fuel, and munitions, but then they go into the common sea lift fleet to bring additional forces forward. For example, the maritime prepositioning ships during the invasion of Iraq in 1990-91, those ships were used as amphibious follow-on vessels. They loaded a lot of gear for the 4th and 5th Marine amphibious units or brigades that came in behind them. And these vessels are extremely small. These again, LSTs. You're talking about 8,000 square feet. A typical MPS vessel will have a 100,000 square feet of roll-on, roll-off space. If you look at the LMSRs that are in the MPS fleet, those have almost 300,000 square feet. And truth berthing for 75 people, 90,000 gallons of fuel, very minimal armament on these vessels. These, LSTs did not go forward in the Pacific during World War II without a lot of coverage on them because they would be wiped out if they did.
However, LSM fielding does not start until 2029.
Okay, we're not even talking about getting any of these things till 2029, which makes sense. I mean, even if they get a contract out and bid it, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to get this out. It's going to take a long time. And then again, how many of these ships are you going to build a year? Even if you build 3 of them a year, it's going to take you 12 years to get these things operational. And then you've committed to this. You've committed to building these 35 vessels. That is going to be a lot. And the question becomes, does your concept of ops really work?
Until then, a bridging solution is required. Some examples in use include the Expeditionary Fast Transport and contracted commercial vessels, which can provide a basic level of mobility. The Expeditionary Fast Transport is an aluminum catamaran based off a commercial design. It is helping to temporarily bridge the gap between airlift and sea lift through its ability to transport Marines and their equipment to austere, shallow draft, and degraded ports.
Okay, can I be clear about the EPFs? These are the Expeditionary Fast Transports. These things were based off a design that came out in the 1990s and 2000s. So, Operation Iraqi Freedom, 2003. You land the Marine Corps prepositioning units in Kuwait, and you bring the Army brigade that's afloat into Kuwait. One of the vessels that was used was a precursor to these vessels, and it was used to get equipment from the prepositioning site in Qatar, and bring it forward. And both the Army and the Marine Corps, after the Iraq War, came up with the idea is we want these vessels. We want 30 of these vessels, 15 for the Army, 15 for the Marine Corps. Well, the Army backed out of the program. They didn't want them. The Navy started building them, but then the Marine Corps backed out of the program. The Marine Corps didn't want them because they viewed them as a threat to their amphibious forces. And so for a long time, these vessels had no mission. They just sat out there and did nothing. As a matter of fact, the program was going to stop, but we keep building these vessels because, number one, we're trying to keep Austell afloat down in Alabama until a new contract is signed and they're building something different, probably Constellation-class frigates. But we've already started laying these vessels up. These vessels are perfect for this. They're ideal for this. They have a cargo area. They got a helideck on top. Now they can't connect the two, which is a problem. Plus they have limited tonnage that can carry on board. Even though they got a big square footage, they can only carry so much tonnage because they're aluminum. They're high speed, but high speed not into bad seas or else you crack the hulls. So they have very limited use, but they were designed really to the idea that you can put a platoon or even a company on board and detach them from a Marine amphibious unit and maybe very quickly deploy them. That was the concept behind them. The problem is you need a port to bring these in. They can't do this amphibiously. They can't be beached. You can bring lighter watercraft in, but their ramps weren't designed to go down to watercraft. So here's a vessel that was kind of a patch-all, but now the Marines are experimenting with them to see if they can put these shoot and scoot type units on, because the Marines have this idea that these units will offload quickly on an island. They'll get out on the island. They'll be able to shoot, do their fires mission, shoot surface to surface, surface to air missiles at a target, and then potentially load back on these vessels and scoot to another place. Now, first off, they do this with with C-130s all the time. The problem with that is you're doing it on an airfield, and you can offload onto an airfield very quickly, do it, and get back on a plane very quickly. Doing it over a beach is a whole different problem because beaches are slower. You're just going to be inherently slower in doing this. And the other problem you have is you're not scooting anywhere on an LSM at 14 knots. The Marine Corps keeps saying, General Heckel just at the West Conference said this, that we're going to be able to hide among the first island chain by, blending in with other surface craft. That's not going to work. Can I be clear? The Marine Corps prepositioning vessels are painted like commercial craft, but everybody knows who they are. They stand out. And all the Chinese will do is put a maritime militia vessel tagged up with these things, and they'll find them everywhere. Not to mention the fact that open source intelligence allows you to find any vessel in the world now, you're not going to be able to hide these vessels. This is not the way it works. All right, keep going.
The Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, working with Military Sea Lift Command, has contracted to charter a commercial stern landing vessel. This vessel will be used to test the shore-to-shore, beach-able concepts associated with Expeditionary Advanced Base operations, where the Expeditionary Fast Transport cannot be used.
Okay, this is the HOS Resolution, chartered by Military Sea Lift Command. It's sitting right now down in Houma, down in Louisiana, undergoing a modification. And I love this picture because I have not seen this before. So this is HOS Resolution. This is from Hornbeck Offshore. Hornbeck Offshore operates offshore vessels. They have multiple contracts with Military Sea Lift Command. They operate vessels for a variety of different military commands. So she's one of the 240 class of offshore supply vessels, roughly a little over 2,000 tons, 2,750 tons. It's got almost 7,000 square feet of deck area, so very comparable for what they want in the LSM. This is her specifications as a supply boat, so very typical forward house. Again, she cannot beach. That's not what she's kind of designed to do, so you're not going to be beaching this vessel per se, but what they came up with was a substitute for being able to beach. You'll see that the vessel has twin bow thrusters here. It's got a stern thruster, and it has normal propeller and shaft, so regular wheels on it. So you can't really back this thing into an area. However, they came up with an alternative for that. So this is back from the video, and one of the things you see here is this image, which is just great because they do a couple of things to Resolution. Number one, they hook this big stern ramp on it. So they got a big folding stern ramp. They put these two pillars on there so that they can lower the stern ramp. But again, as I said, you can't beach this vessel. How do they get by with that? Well, they put on jack legs, these gray posts right here you see. These are in the hoisted up position. And this lower picture shows her sitting on the seafloor. She'll get close enough to the beach to hold her position. They'll basically have to maneuver, probably with a tug or small boats, move her into position, and then lower these legs and actually lift the vessel up. And that will stabilize the vessel so that it won't move. I will say that it creates a bit of a problem here because these legs will anchor that vessel into position. It's not like when you actually beach a vessel and have to put the bow anchor out and hold it in place. It's going to give you a false illusion that these vessels don't move because in a cross current, it's not going to move with those anchor legs out. But they'll be able to hoist the vessel up pretty close to the beach, get it up, and then use that stern ramp to come off. And so they'll be able to simulate, offloading their fires units, their naval ship-to-ship missiles and anti-aircraft missiles and all the gear on and off the vessel here. So you'll get a simulation of this. They can also do this with Army watercraft. Can I be clear? The Army operates a batch of watercraft that would simulate this also. So this is Army watercraft. These are two LSVs, landing ship vehicles. The one with the large bow ramp here is one of the older ones. One of the newer ones has the built-in bow ramp. And then right next to it is an LCU 2000. And these are standard Army watercraft. Army does this all the time. And I'm really interested in the cooperation between the Army and the Marine Corps. It would seem to me the best solution or test would be to get some of these Army LSVs and test the concept because these vessels can actually beach and you can ride off the ramp and you can encounter the real problems you will have with amphibious watercraft. It's great to have a simulation. It's great to bring the HOS vessel in and do that. But these vessels will give you the actual real work. Now, they may be doing that. I'm not sure. I'm not privy to all the Marine Corps is doing. And I'm sure I'll get in the comments below, oh, you don't know what the Marine... Because the Marine Corps will not talk about it. And so got to go based on what they released. Happy to have them come on and talk about it all they want.
The lessons learned using the stern landing vessel will be valuable in developing the final requirements for the LSM.
So they go back to history here a little bit, and of course here come the images they want you to share. But remember, these LSTs and LSMs are going to show you here are operating under the environment of the whole fleet. And, when they talk about shooting and scooting and operating clandestinely in the first island chain, it's important to understand they have to have support for these vessels. They're not going to be able to do this without protection, because if not, these vessels will be extremely exposed. So one of the easiest things to do is to sit here and punch a hole in a concept and not have a solution to it. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you what I think is the solution to what the Marines want to do. They want to be able to operate, move forces around, small forces around, but at the same time be disguised, be able to move around. So I'm going to give you a concept that is being used or being proposed by the Royal Navy, and one that is being used by the U.S. right now. So this is an article from Navy Outlook on a concept advocated by the Royal Navy, which is called the Littoral Strike Ship concept. Now, they are doing this, but they're doing it with a different platform right now. But the idea here was they were going to take a commercial roll-on, roll-off ship, very akin to what they did during the Falklands War with ships like the Atlantic Conveyor, and convert them into a different style of vessel. And they did this based on a ship that the U.S. did it on. But I want to show you this first because their concept was really interesting. So you take this commercial roll-on, roll-off ship, you fit this large berthing area on the stern, you turn the forward area into a flight deck with a hangar deck there, and then below deck in the roll-on, roll-off spaces, you have cargo space, you have crew spaces, and you bring lighterage and watercraft so that you can move that cargo ashore. You don't beach the vessel, but you take it ashore. So when you look at its operations, it has a pretty good flight deck akin to an expeditionary support base. It has boats, so that you can basically launch them, everything from rib boats to larger watercraft that you can put on there. And then you have the stern ramp. Understand the Navy has an integrated naval logistics system, basically barge watercraft, which can be loaded on these vessels. You can mount the barges along the side. You can launch them the way the maritime prepositioning ships launch them and be able to ferry ashore the gear you want. You don't have to physically beach the vessel to do this. And the reason I raise this is because the U.S. Navy is already doing this. So I wrote this article back in 2017 about the ultimate stealth ship. This is a vessel called the Ocean Trader. It's operated by Maersk Lines, and the ship was formerly the Craigside. And it's a standard kind of European roll-on, roll-off vessel. But what they've done is taken that vessel and converted it. There you see it on the bottom, and on top you can see how it's been modified. That Royal Navy concept was basically taking this concept and going with it. They put these large areas here where you can swing out watercraft. You can do landing craft if you want. You have the large area here for hangars. And if you rig this thing right, by the way, with ramps and platforms within the vessel, you can actually bring your fire platforms out here, your naval strike missiles, your anti-air missiles, and launch them from the flight deck of the vessel. You don't even have to go ashore. You can turn these things into mobile strike launches. Paint this thing the normal color of a merchant ship, and it will fairly well blend in, a lot more than one of those landing ship mediums. And so there are concepts out there that they should be looking at. And again, this is being operated right now by the Military Sea Lift Command for the Special Operations Command. And I guess the question I have is what is the plan here for these light amphibious warships? 35 ships in a new building program on a concept that has never been used before. What gets me nervous about this program sounds a lot like LCS, the Littoral Combat Ship. Here's the concept. This is what we're going to do. It sounds great. We're going to zip in, zip out. We're going to use this concept. And by the time it eventually comes to fruition, it's overcome by events. And I think just designing this vessel, first off, they want to build it for 100 to 130 million. Well, General Heckel said in a piece in Defense News, that's probably not going to happen now, because the Navy will not allow these vessels to be so lightly defended. So now you're going to drive the cost from 100 to 130 million to $350 million. There is no way, I am sorry, I just cannot foresee them building 35 of these things. You may get enough for one littoral regiment, but I just don't see this working. Whereas the Craigside, the Ocean Trader, You start building those vessels have commercial capabilities. They have sea lift recapitalization. You can reform the Maritime Prepositioning Force and Army Sea Lift and Army Afloat Prepositioning. There's a lot of utility and versatility in those vessels. You can put them in an active reserve fleet where you lease them to commercial vessels to use up and down the east and west coast. There's a lot of potential for those vessels. You can convert them into Navy auxiliaries should they need them, tenders, command vessels, such. There are a lot of potential to do that. Look at how the Maritime Administration right now is building 5 national multi-mission security vessels for the 5 state maritime academies that need new training ships. You need to look at versatility and other options, and I just think this concept has a lot of the same ingredients as LCS, and it gets me nervous watching it. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit that super thanks button below where you can give directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon and become a yearly or monthly subscriber to the page. That allows me to put these videos together and to wear great shirts like this. It's a hump day here at Campbell University, the home of the Fighting Camels. So I hope you enjoy the shirt. Until our next video, this is Sal, signing off.